Okay, so I think we'll just start. Not many of us are online right now, but we have to keep to time. All right, so once again, you're welcome to this presentation via Zoom tonight. The topic we're looking at is pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, what it offers. Pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, that means PGD for short. What does it offer? Now, pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, it's a technology that helps us through the ART technology to prevent the transmission of genetic diseases from one offspring to another, or from one generation to another generation. So meaning that if there is a genetic disease that is present in a parent, through the pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, you are able to prevent the transmission of that disease from parents to offspring. So if a son or a daughter is born and the parents were aware that they had a genetic disease that was transferred from their parents, whether it's in the man or in the woman, then through the PGD technology, you are able to prevent that disease from being transmitted to the next generation. All right? So that is what PGD does. Now, there are so many examples of genetic diseases that can be transmitted. You have things like cystic fibrosis, Tay-Sachs disease, Huntington's disease, hemophilia, muscular dystrophies. But the more important one that is very prevalent in our environment and which we'll be laying some emphasis on is the sickle cell disease. All right, the sickle cell disease is a very common disease condition in our environment. It affects the black race much more than the white. In fact, rarely do you find it among the white race. It's a disease of the black people. And I'm sure that very many of us are probably, if we don't have direct relationship with someone who has had it or a family member, we probably know of friends or families who have individuals that have the sickle cell disease. And it is not a disease that you want to have in the family because it drains a lot of resources. The cost of care of a child that has sickle cell disease is a lot. A lot is required to be able to care for individuals that have the sickle cell. And such individuals commonly will have a lot of crises, bone crises. They come down with anemia. The reason is because the red blood cells are sickled. They have a funny shape. They get destroyed very easily in trying to pass through the blood vessels. And so most times the sufferers of this sickle cell disease will come down with anemia, and they oftentimes will have other crises like bone pain crisis. All right, so, but the good news is that with the pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, one is able to prevent a couple that have AS genotype from having a child that has the disease. Now, if you have a couple that have both AS, the chances that they will have a child that is a sickler is 25%. And then 50% chance that the child will be an AS. And then 25% chance that it will be an AA. And 25% chance that it will be a sickler, that is a very high chance. And in this day and age, we shouldn't be having any child that is born that has the sickle cell disease. And so we can say authoritatively that with PGD, pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, is no more sickle cell babies. Because with PGD, there's a 100% chance of having an AA genotype child, and a 0% chance of having an SS or an AS genotype child. And that is what the technology has afforded us. All right? It's also very important for us to know that apart from the sickle cell disease, there are other diseases that can be prevented through the pre-implantation genetic diagnosis. Specifically are diseases that we call sex-linked genetic diseases, meaning that these diseases are found only in a particular sex. And so if you have a disease that is X-linked, it means that that disease will be found only in a male sex, all right? Because it is X-linked. So diseases like hemophilia, red color blindness, congenital night blindness, Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, and Fragile X syndrome, all of these diseases are found in the XY chromosome. Now, because it requires just one, it calls an X-linked recessive inheritance. Therefore means that if you have the person will carry that disease. But if it's a female, then the best that will happen is that the female will be a carrier. All right? So that is how a sex-linked disease can be identified. And so to prevent a sex-linked disease, you want to determine the sex of the embryo before the embryos are transferred. And so for a parent that have a sex-linked disorder that affects only the male, you want to make sure that when they have a child, that child is a female. So it is because of this technology that we are also able to provide gender balancing, family gender balancing. And what that means is that because we can determine the sex of the embryo before the embryo is transferred, we can therefore determine which sex to transfer. So for a couple that wants to have only the male embryos, want to have a male sex, then it's only the XY embryo that will be transferred. And if you have another couple that wants to have the female sex, the XX embryo will be transferred. So that is how. So, like we said before, PGD is pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, the process of detecting any abnormality in an embryo before the embryo is transferred into the uterus. Now, this is done in parents with known genetic disease. All right. So if you have a parent that has a known genetic disease in either of the couple, there is a tendency for that genetic disease to be transmitted to their offspring. So what you do is through the ART technology with PGD, you are able to determine or test or check the embryos that are generated before they are transferred. Right? It is the embryos that are generated through IVF. Exclude any genetic order for embryo transfer is done. All right. So that is what PGD is. Now, there's also a term called PGS. Now, PGS is pre-implantation genetic screening. Okay, it's the process of genetic testing of all embryos before transfer to detect abnormalities in parents with genetic disease. So the difference between PGD and PGS is that in PGD, it is done in parents with a known genetic disease. That means they already know that they have a genetic disease. But in PGS, PGS is often done during our IVF process. All right, when we want to screen embryos to be sure that there are no abnormalities, no chromosomal abnormalities, no genetic abnormalities. And in the same vein, we are able to determine the sex of the embryos and determine if there's any single gene disorder like sickle cell disease. So for example, there are some IVF centers where they will routinely do a pre-implantation genetic screening just to find out if the embryos have any abnormalities, particularly in women who are above 35 who are using their eggs. As they approach 40 and above, there's a very high chance that most of the embryos will have what we call aneuploidy, that's there are abnormalities in the embryos. All right.
You went through the terms and conditions.
So that is done to before transfer is carried.
Your email address, your residential address, the state of the rest of residence. Then they ask you to input 2 figures, right? Just type any 2 figures. Just input any 2 figures.
Ochoya, mute your mic. Okay. All right. So this is the process. All right. So you have an egg, and then it forms a zygote. It goes through the different stages of development. This 2-cell stage, the 4-cell stage, is dividing, and then this is the morula stage. All right, where you had a lot of division, and then this is the blastocyst stage. This is the 5 stage. And for those who are going through the normal IVF, it is this embryo that is transferred, because we normally do the 5 embryo transfer. So we will transfer this. But if we want to do a pre-implantation genetic screening or diagnosis through what we call biopsy, I will show you that very shortly. We will pick 1 or 2 cells from here and we will test them. We will send it for genetic testing. With just 1 or 2 cells from these many cells that have been formed, we are able to determine so many things. We're able to determine any genetic disease, any chromosomal abnormalities. We're able to determine the sex of the baby. We're also able to determine the genotype, all right, of the baby, to determine if there is any single gene disorder, all right? And so we will take 1 or 2 cells. Let me show you. Okay, so this is how the PGD is done. So you remove 1 or 2 cells from the developing embryo through a process called biopsy. So this is what is being done right now. You see this? 1 or 2 cells are being collected, are being removed, and they are sent for genetic testing to determine various gene or chromosomal disorders. Now, once you take these cells from this embryo, the embryo is then frozen, all right? Because you can't, the process of determining what the result is takes some days. So what will happen is that on day 5, when we are supposed to do your transfer in the embryology lab through a very special machine, the biopsy is done to collect 1 or 2 cells. They are sent for genetic testing, and thereafter these embryos are frozen. So the embryos are labeled, all right? So when the result of the genetic testing is done, is out, we can now be able to determine, for example, if we are doing a sex selection program or a genotype selection program or any gene disorder, we are able to tell which of the embryo has a challenge or not. So once again, embryo culture through an IVF ICSI process, and then the embryo biopsy is done on day 5 of the embryo culture when the embryo is not at the blastocyst stage. It is sent, put into the tube, and then it is sent for genetic testing, all right? And then you will now get the results and determine what the results are, all right? So this is how the process of PGD is done. Now that is why we often say that the process of PGD is done in 2 phases. So for people who want to do a sex selection program or a genotype selection program, the first phase will be to generate the embryos, send 1 or 2 cells through embryo biopsy, and send it for genetic testing. Now, we do our genetic testing outside the country. Are there no centers that do this genetic testing in Nigeria? Well, 1 or 2, but we prefer to use centers abroad just because we are sure, and we have been doing business with them for quite a while, so they are quite reliable. So we'll send this out, and then we will now freeze the embryos one after the other after they have been biosighed. And then they are frozen, and then we await the results of the test. So once the results of the test are out, we are able to tell, for example, if it was a sex selection program that was done, we are able to tell which embryos are male and which embryos are female. We are also able to tell which embryos have any genetic or chromosomal abnormalities in the embryos, because we also would include that. And we tell patients that that will also be done. So we don't only determine the sex, but we also use that opportunity to determine whether the embryos are chromosomally okay or not. And then if it's a genotype selection that we are doing, the results will come as either an homogeneous homozygote, in which case it is either AA or or SS, or heterozygote, in which case it is AS. So you whether have an AA, an AS, or an SS. And of course, once you're able to determine which embryo has all of those, then you can now transfer only embryos that are AA. That is how we are able to prevent the SS genotype from being transmitted. All right, so that's basically what the pre-implantation genetic diagnosis is all about. All right, that is the process. Now, a very big question, I'm sure a lot of you would want to find out, is what is the cost of PGD? I will just straight up tell you that it's expensive. It's an expensive process, all right? Unlike IVF, that will cost between 1.2 to 1.6, 1.8 million. PGD, it's expensive, and usually one cycle, the whole process, from when you generate the embryos, you do the biopsy, you send them for genetic testing, and later you now transfer the embryos that are required. Whether if it's a sex selection, you transfer the sex that is required, or if it's a genotype selection, you transfer only the genotype that is desired, which is AA. All right, that process completes, makes it one cycle. All right, usually between 5 to 7 million, depending on whether you are doing sex selection or genotype selection. Genotype selection is more expensive than the sex selection. All right. But the good news is that we are introducing what we call the JOJE PGD project. What is this project all about? The vision of the project is to make PGD services accessible and affordable. Meaning that though it's very expensive and the cost is going up every day because everything is going up. Like I told you, everything that we do in ART is based on the dollar, because the medications we use, the media we use, even the testing that is done, the genetic testing, we pay in dollars. Everything is dollarized. Because of the high rate of devaluation of the Naira, it has made the cost very expensive. You know, when we started this project, when we first launched it, it was actually late last year. I think it was in December. Though we're just having this first presentation now, things have gone up compared to then when we first started. All right. Well, I'll just quickly go through some of the PGD programs that we run and what the cost is. So we have one cycle of sex selection, which includes one controlled ovarian stimulation with less or equal to 12 embryos. Now, what that means is that for sex selection, what that means is that a woman would come who is desirous, a couple will come who is desirous of going through a sex selection program to have a particular sex. They will go through the process of stimulation to generate eggs, which will be fertilized to generate embryos. Now, if you go through that process and you go through that stimulation process once to generate embryos that could be anything less than 12 embryos, the cost is 4.5 million. You see that I use that less or equal to. Okay, so I said I was going to quickly go through the normal cost for our PGD programs, and I was explaining the first program, which is the one cycle sex selection program, which include one controlled ovarian stimulation that will generate up to 12 embryos. The second one is one cycle of sex selection program with 2 stimulation process. What that means is that we would go through the first process, biopsize the embryos, we'll freeze them, and then after 2-3 months, we will go through another process again of stimulation. This is particularly done when we don't have enough embryos to send. All right? Because the cost is based on the number of embryos, and there are specific embryos that we want to achieve before we send. And so if we're not having enough embryos to send, we want to go through that process again to generate more embryos. Now, if we are doing 2 stimulation process and biopsy and freezing, then that is the cost. Now, if we're going through one cycle of sex selection program, and in that one cycle, we are able to generate more than 12 embryos that are sent for genetic testing, that is the cost. So you can see that there's a difference between these and these. So that will tell you that the cost also differs depending on the number of embryos that are sent. And then if you are doing 2 stimulation process, all right, with more than 12 embryos sent, this is the cost. All right. Now, we also have what we call a 2-cycle program. In the first one that I talked about, this is 1 cycle, meaning that inside. Now, we have done this variation just to make it a bit more cost effective. All right. So meaning that in a single cycle program, you can have 2 stimulation process, all right, before you do your first transfer, all right, before you send to for genetic testing, you have generated enough embryos, and before you send for genetic testing, before the first transfer is done. Now, when we say 2-cycle program, 2-cycle program means that you have done, so this is a 2-cycle program with ovarian stimulation in each cycle. What this means is that a patient came, you went through the first cycle, you went through stimulation to generate embryos once, generated the embryos, sent for genetic testing, and then after 2 months, you did your transfer. And if that process does not work, you start all over again, you take the patient through a stimulation process, generate embryos, send for testing, and then you do your transfer. All right. So this is the cost for 2-cycle. Now, you can also have a 2-cycle program where you will have to do the stimulation twice in each cycle. So you do in the first cycle, you go through the stimulation process twice, and then you send for genetic testing, and then you do your transfer. And if the patient doesn't get pregnant, you start afresh again, 2 cycles, and then you send for genetic testing, and then you do a transfer. All right. And then this is the cost for a frozen embryo transfer. Now, in the single transfer that I talked about, there are some times where we are able to generate enough embryos, particularly if you did a 2-cycle program. All right, we do a 2-cycle program, we're able to generate enough embryos, all right, which we will send. And then if we still have embryos, for example, if we did a sex selection program, and let's say we're able to generate through a 2-cycle stimulation, we're able to generate more than 12 embryos that were sent for genetic testing. And it came out that, for example, 6 of those embryos were male and chromosomally fine. There was no challenge with them, 6 embryos. Now, we won't transfer the 6 embryos. We will transfer 3. All right? We will transfer 3 embryos, and that means you still have 3 male embryos that are left. Now, in the event that you don't get pregnant, now, let me just say this. Your chance of getting the sex that you want or the genotype, the chance of getting the genotype right is 98%. The chance of getting the sex right is 97, 98%. But the chance of getting pregnant with the desired sex, desired embryo, is 50%. So it's possible that you go through this process, we have the embryos generated, and when we do the transfer, you have a 50% chance that you will get pregnant. But when you get pregnant, you have a 97, 98% chance that it will be the sex that you desire or the genotype that you desire. All right? Now, so let's say, for example, we have transferred 3 out of the 6 embryos that we have. And let's say you got pregnant and you have a boy, for example, or a girl, depending on the sex that was transferred. And if you want to come back to have the embryo transferred, that is when you'll be required to pay 600 because you already have an embryo frozen with us. Or if the first process did not succeed and you want to come back again for the second embryos, for second embryo transfer, for embryos that already have been genetically determined, they have done their tests and we have them frozen, then that is when you'll be required to pay this amount, 600. So if within 3 months of the first transfer, you're coming back, this is all you'll be required to pay. But if you got pregnant, for example, and you waited for maybe 2 years and you want to still come back and have more boys, for example, if it's a sex selection for males that you did, or more females if it's for a female selection, then what you'll be paying will be 600 plus the cost of storage for that 2 years. If it's within 3 months, you're not paying anything for storage. It's part of the initial program. But if it's more than 3 months, whenever you're coming, you will pay this plus the cost of storage, which is 10,000 per month and 120,000 a year. All right? And so this is the process. So what a lot of couples do is that rather than do a 2-cycle program, which is very expensive, as I can tell, many of them will want to go with the initial, with a 1-cycle program that has 2 stimulation process in a bid to generate more embryos, hoping that we will have more embryos with a particular sex, for example, or genotype that we desire. But it's important for me to say also that it is also possible to go through this process, generate more embryos, but at the end of the day, you will not have enough of the embryos that you desire. It sometimes has to do with the dominance of that particular sex. All right? All right, so we've gone through this. Now, this is for genotype selection. Like I said before, genotype selection is more expensive than sex selection. Why? Because of the process of genetic testing, and also the process of the generation of the embryos. All right. So while you will notice that for a sex selection program, 1 cycle of sex selection that includes 1 stimulation process was 4.5. For sex selection, for genotype selection is 5.9. And while you had so this is the same, 5.9. Now for more than 12 embryos is 6.9. Why? Because the cost is based on the number of embryos that are sent. All right. Now, if you have to do 2 stimulation process to get more embryos, which will definitely be above 12 embryos, this is the cost, 7.7. All right. And then exactly the same program we have for sex selection, we have for genotype selection. And these are the costs. All right. This is two stimulation process. That is why it's 6.9. For 1 stimulation process is 5.9. Now these are 2-cycle genotype selection with 1 stimulation process in each cycle. Like I explained for the sex selection, you go through 1 process of stimulation, generate embryos, you do the biopsy, the genetic testing, and then you transfer. And if that doesn't go well, or it went well and you want to come back again, then you go through the same process and you're paying 9.4. All right. Now, if you are doing 2 stimulation in each of the 2 cycles, then it's 10.9. And then if you are doing a frozen embryo transfer, if you have enough embryos and you've done the first transfer with the program, this is the cost within 3 months. After 3 months, this plus the cost for frozen embryo transfer. I'm sure a lot of you will be saying, wow, this is a lot of money. Considering the economic situation we have in the country right now, I agree with you. But the economic situation has made it worse because of the devaluation of the naira. Now, this is the discount that we are proposing in our project, in our PGD project. And so if on this project, if you want to do a sex selection program for 1 cycle, that includes 1 stimulation process to generate less or equal to 12 embryos, rather than pay 4.5, what you will be paying will be 3.6. All right. And if for the 1 cycle of sex selection that includes 2 stimulation, instead of paying 5.5, you'll be paying 4.4. And instead of paying 5 million for the one cycle of sex selection program that includes one stimulation with more than 12 embryos, instead of paying 5 million, you'll be paying 4 million. So what we have done is to apply a 20% discount for all our programs that we currently run. If you ask me, this is a good deal. And we are trusting that we'll be able to pull enough patients together to be able to apply this discount so that we'll be able to run this program successfully. Right? The last time we had a sex selection program for 3.6 was so many years ago. That was when dollar was still about maybe less than 300. That was when we were doing this program. Okay. So if you ask me, because of the chance of pregnancy when you do the transfer, a lot of patients would want to increase their chance of success. So they would often want to go with a program that can increase the number of embryos that will be generated so that they can have enough of the desired embryo. So for example, if you are coming for a sex selection program, we want to generate enough embryos so that at the end of the day, you have a higher chance of having more embryos that are male or female, so that when we do a first transfer and it doesn't go well, you can now go ahead and pay the 600. Okay, I think we have, for the discount, we are offering that at 500. You can now go ahead and pay the 500, and then you can have the second transfer done. All right, instead of going through the two cycles. Okay, except of course in situations where the number of embryos that are generated are not enough, even after you have done 2 cycles. All right, you're not enough to go for 2 cycles, in which case you will have to now go for one cycle program. So after the investigations, we'll be able to counsel you appropriately on what would be the best program to pick, whether to go for the one cycle program that offers 2 stimulation or 1 stimulation, all right, or the one cycle that offers 2, or to go for 2 cycle programs that offers 1 stimulation or 2 stimulations. I hope I'm being understood. Well, if you have any questions, please just send me a chat. I'm sure you'll be able to locate the chat room where you can send me a chat, and then I will be able to answer your questions. All right, so these are the discounts that we are currently applying at this time to be able to run a PGD program that is, well, some may still say that these programs are still not affordable. Unfortunately, because of the very high cost of the high devaluation, it is, and the high inflation rate, is very difficult to be able to offer more discounts for couples to be able to offer, for people to go through this process. But like I said before, PGD is an expensive process. So to be able to offer at this time a sex selection program for 3.6, that is some discount that is being offered. All right, and then for genotype selection, One cycle of genotype selection is 4.72 instead of the 5.9 million that we currently run the program right now. And then that goes for all the others. Okay? And then these are the 2 cycle program. And then the frozen transfer the second time. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention. At this time, I want to take some questions.
Okay.
Oh,
Good
I
evening,
didn't see that.
everyone.
Sorry about that. What's the name?
Okay. My name is Joy. I'm from Lagos.
Okay.
Okay, so I called your foundation sometime last week and I spoke with Dr. Joy, and she told me the cost of IVF is 600,000. And there's another one. Okay, she said if I'm using a donor egg, which I will likely use, that is 300,000 plus uterine something that is also 300,000 after pregnancy is confirmed, and that will be about 1.250, while the testing and all that is 50,000. So, but now you're telling me that is 1.2. So I don't know what is embedded in the 1.2 you're calling.
Now you asked, that is you said the foundation. So if you are going to the foundation, that is the rate, that is the discounted rate.
Okay.
That is not our normal. You asked for our rates. So what the rate I gave you was our normal rate.
Okay.
Yes, so our normal rate is between 1.2 to 1.7. But if you're coming to the foundation, then what Dr. Joy told you.
Okay, that's fine. So I don't know, do you have any plans of coming to Lagos, or you just want to stay in Abuja? It's been a while. You've been in Abuja all this while. At least to save us some stress of flying all the time to Abuja and coming back.
Yeah, we do have plans of setting up in Lagos. It's in the works. All right.
Okay.
It's in the works. But for now, we will try to make it as easy, as convenient as possible for patients who are coming in from outside Abuja. And we do have quite a number of patients who are coming actually from outside Abuja. And what we try to do is to make your visit twice. So you come in for the initial visit, which could be for a day or two.
Okay.
And then that visit, a lot is done. You do your initial evaluation, your investigation, result review, and then we do a mock embryo transfer. All right, and then we ensure that everything is sorted out, and then you go with all of your medications. If you have made your payments. As long as you can have a center where you can do a transvaginal scan in Lagos, we can work with the results that you send to us and guide you accordingly until when it is close for you to come in for the insemination. And then you come in and within a week, you're having your embryo transfer. And then you can go back to Lagos.
That will be about 4 visits.
So that will be 2 visits. First visit, you come for your evaluation. Second visit for the program itself, and then off you go. Just 2 visits.
What about getting the sperm and all?
Yes, of course. You come with your husband on this. So both of you are making two visits.
Okay, that's fine.
Yes, so both of you are making 2 visits. Fine. You come in for the first, both of you will come. He has his test done. And then if he wants to do just 1 visit, it's also possible.
Really?
Yes. What we do is that when you come in the first time and you do your test, if he's a very busy person or he travels a lot, we can actually have his sperm frozen. Particularly
that's fine.
If his sperm is good, the parameters are normal. You can actually have his sperm frozen so that you don't want to come again the second time. So you're the only one who will just come in.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. All right. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Okay. Can you avail us the presentation recording so that we can go through it in our own? Thank you. Okay, we will try and put it on the website so that you can go through the presentation. All right, that can be done. Okay. Any other person raising up his or her hand? I actually cannot see that now. So if you are, please you can just speak up. Just identify yourself and ask your question. Unmute your mic and then you speak, and then I will respond. No person? Okay. Okay. Aboki praise. Hand is raised. Okay, go ahead. Aboki praise. Aboki praise, you can go ahead. You raised up your hand. If you are speaking and we can't hear you, unmute your mic.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. What about somebody with hydrosalpinx? How are you able to dictate if the person has it? Because I was told that anybody that has it and wants to go for an IVF, that the IVF will not be successful because of that.
And so if you have hydrosalpinx, then
and the person does not even know. How will you be able to dictate to ensure that
you will have endometrial fluid?
Okay, smart, sir.
I said the person would have endometrial fluid. That is how you detect. That is how it affects IVF process. The fluid in the tubes will track and flow into the endometrium. So during our regular scans,
okay,
during the scanning session, we will be able to pick up endometrial fluid. That's how we suspect that someone has hydrosalpinx.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Yes, sir.
All right. Nobody's asking specific question concerning the PGD program. Is it that we understood everything, or we are too confused that we can't even ask any question, or the prices have just made
Someone
us?
who just want to get pregnant, the person will be thinking of that one.
Pardon?
Someone who, if you know that, say from the beginning, during the course of the investigation, the person should know the genotype and all that. So of course, one plus or minus, you will know you will not be needing that.
No, I think the person who requires the genotype.
For the genotype, most times it's not for the one who maybe is AS, SS, and all that. So they want to do that so that they can have
for couples that are AS and AS. Because this particular presentation was put particularly for those who are interested in PGD for sex selection and genotype selection.
Okay.
Yes, so that's the audience I'm speaking to, because when we did this thing, we were asked to select which program you're interested in. So I'm assuming that I'm speaking to not those who are interested in getting pregnant, but those who are interested in getting pregnant with a particular sex, or a couple that is AS that want to avoid having a child that is SS.
Yes, SS.
Yes. Because the presentation for our normal programs is a different presentation entirely. when we go through the whole process of IVF as it takes place at our center. So I'm assuming that the audience have been presenting to are those who are interested in sex selection. You probably have a particular sex already and you want to do sex selection, or those couples that are ASAS that want to get pregnant but ensure that they don't have a child that is SS. All right, so any other comments or questions? Okay. Abuki praise.
I'm done with my question, sir.
Okay, you're done. Okay, I just saw your hand raised up. Okay. All right, so thank you very much. So if there are no more questions or comments, I want to sincerely, on behalf of the foundation and the JOJE Abebe Fertility Center, thank every one of you who came online to be part of this presentation. Like I said, we're going to leave the recording and the slides on our website so that those who could not be part of this, who would visit our website and our social media handles, will be able to benefit from this knowledge that have been shared tonight. So once again, I want to say thank you very much. And for those of you who are planning to go for an IVF program to get pregnant, don't delay, get started. And I believe God that by the end of this year, we shall be sharing a good testimony. God bless you and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, sir.